Hello, and welcome to the Families Embracing Diversity podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa, and today we are talking with Nanny Jen, who has parented 20 kids from bottles to backpacks. And in that time, she's pretty much become an expert on all things parenting. She'll share some things that she learned in parenting or working with families across different cultural and ethnic backgrounds, some essential truths that she has learned that work for all parents, regardless of your background, how to involve grandparents as keepers of the culture and keepers of tradition, and as well as some tips for when your children are inching into puberty and other stages of development. You definitely don't want to miss this conversation, so give it a listen. So before nannying, you did something else in your adult life and then you became.
Oh, many things. I have had a variety of careers. So I started out, I went to a high school for smart kids.
Okay.
So I know you're recording this, so I'm going to apologize in advance to the podcast listeners. I have been raised by
Edit.
I've been raised by intelligentsia. My mother was a college professor. My father was an attorney. I have been exposed to vocabulary at a high level. And so if I say something that makes you have to go look it up in the dictionary, that's kind of normal for me in interacting with people, but I'm sorry. But I went to a high school for smart kids, and in that high school, I got an opportunity to intern in a lab doing polymer chemistry. And I discovered I really liked chemistry. And I liked chemistry because, as I later learned, there was a right answer. And I, carried a little bit of anxiety within me to the point where like ambiguous situations really unnerved me, but only on a minor level. And right answers were good. I mean, I wasn't unnerved. I knew whether my answer was right, and I knew it was the right answer. So I ended up pursuing chemistry in college. And at some point, somebody sort of nudged me into teaching in college. They nudged me into being a TA, which was unusual for an undergrad, but my advisor said, you can handle it. I've seen you, I know you. And so I started teaching, and I fell in love with it. And my students did really, really well. So then I decided I wanted to be a chemistry teacher rather than a bench chemist. But first, you got to make the money to pay for the grad school, because I worked my way through college as well. And so I worked for the National Institutes of Health as a bench chemist, giving support to a water quality unit and a unit that studied it was the Department of Immunology and Toxicology. So it studied like the cancer causing agents, which the answer is, for those who are curious, everything gives you cancer at all. Breathing is linked with cancer. Drinking water is linked with cancer. There is no water you can drink that's not linked with cancer. So like, live your life as best you can and leave no regrets on the table is what my lab came up with. But from there, I went to grad school, picked up a teaching credentials and a graduate degree in education, and then taught for 4 years, maxed out my career track there. I ended up becoming department chair and really well recognized. My students were, it sounds boastful, but they were top of the state in our standardized tests on chemistry. And so I started looking around for my next challenge, because I like a good challenge. And I realized discipline was my big challenge. And I discovered, so I said, I gotta take it down. I was working with college kids, and then I was working with high school kids. I gotta take it back to, early childhood, figure out how this discipline connection thing works. So I became a nanny, which, by the way, pays more than any of those previous careers.
That is a lucrative nanny position.
Yeah. And so I said, I'm going to do this until I understand discipline and until it stops being fun. And so I got disciplined by like my 7th nanny kid, which was about 5 years in, but it's still fun. So here I am to this day. And I think I'm going to retire from this position.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But parenting does not have right answers. So
no, so I learned to become comfortable with that. I learned how to differentiate parenting. You meet the kids where they are, you accept who they are, you accept their limitations as they are, and you invite them in to help problem solve. You say to them, like, the spoon needs to go in the sink. The spoon is currently on the couch. The couch is not the sink. How do we get the spoon to the sink where I'm not the one who walks it? The spoon obviously doesn't have legs. what you got. Yeah, and even a 3-year-old, even a 2-year-old, they come up with some fantastic ideas. I mean, like, well, what if the spoon grew wings and flew to the sink? And you're like, okay, that'll go on the list. And then you cull the list later and you go, which ones of these are realistic? Oh, I should take the spoon to the sink. But it works across any child of any age at any point, so long as they're verbal. And if they're pre-verbal, they can't take the spoon to the sink anyway. So let's be real.
Yeah.
It really does, and it works to incorporate them. And then as they get older, I've discovered, and this is sort of the right answer for parenting. Of course, it doesn't, every child is going to come up with a different system for getting the spoon to the sink. But as they get older, when you have to start saying no, because they start doing risky things, and there's this whole no is a bad word movement. It is not. You cannot teach a child to respect somebody else's no if they never hear it. It is
Right.
not a bad word. It is a very important word. It shouldn't be tossed around all willy-nilly, but we should use it to teach the children how to respond, respect, and when to issue their own no. But you have to start saying no at a particular age. And by then, the child will say, okay, I'm not. I'm pausing, I'm stopping, I'm freezing. I won't continue, but there's a reason here. There's always been a reason for everything that's happened up until this point. Would you mind teaching me the reason? And then you teach them the reason, and then you sit off in the corner and you watch. And one of their friends says, hey, you want to go run in the street? And they're like, actually, that's not a good idea. Here's why.
Right.
And you watch that, and then you watch them start to, in education terms, it's called synthesis or application. You watch them take what they know. Oh, cars can't see me at this height. I'm going to carry a big tall flag when I go to the mailbox to check the mail. You start watching them use the reason to start applying it to the world and figuring out how to live in the world, knowing why certain things were or weren't.
Right.
And so there are right answers. It's just a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work. Most parents did not sign up to be child development specialists and early childhood educators. And that's really what the job is.
It is. You get sent home from the hospital with a little person and say, good luck.
Yeah. There's one of my nanny colleagues. So I'm in my area, when you've got over a decade in, you sort of, it's a short list of other nannies who also have over a decade in, so you know them. And one of them, she finally had her own child, and the neonatal nurse said to her, normally when we send a kid home, I'm feeling kind of iffy about the parent. She's like, I am so confident you'll be fine. I can't believe this is your first child. She's like, well, on the grand scheme of things, this is my 16th child. But yeah. Her poor kid, man, he can't get away with anything. She's seen it all.
He'll be a high quality child though.
Yeah.
So in all those experiences, you said you parented over 20 kids?
20 exactly.
20 kids.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that some of those families have different cultural, socioeconomic, economic backgrounds. How have you seen, let's say, culture and ethnicity influence parenting styles?
Oh my. I have drawn some conclusions. They talk about stereotypes, and for me, it's more generalities. I've drawn some conclusions based on certain ethnic backgrounds, especially how recently they immigrated to the United States. If the parent is an immigrant, they're probably going to hold a little stronger to the traditional parenting from their home country. And if the parent has been, Americanized, their third generation or something, it's probably going to be a little less. But I have seen some things across cultures, and I've picked up from the parents some bits that I think are good and sort of synthesized them into my nannying. So my first nanny family was from France, fresh off the boat from France. They came with 3 kids. The 3 kids did not speak English. The parents did. And I was hired because of my teaching background. I did something called SIOP, which is a sheltered, inclusive, like specifically for people who just need English immersion. And I was supposed to teach them science and English simultaneously. So they hired me for that. My French is very poor, and the kids made fun of me for it. And I adore French parenting because the parents do not give up their identities.
Mhm.
They, if anybody referred to the mom as Antoinette's mom, she would say, no, no, no. My name is Eloise. I am not Antoinette's mom. Antoinette is my daughter, yes, but this is not my name. My name is Eloise. And they
Hmm.
so clung to their individual identities, and they viewed parenting as a job. They were inviting more children into their family structure, but they were not, as I've seen it, in America, it wasn't an identity.
Mhm.
They kept their original identity. And as a result, they treated their children as competent unless proved otherwise.
Hmm.
So that
Interesting.
was pretty cool. And then my second nanny family was German, and they were all about that efficiency. I mean, it's the stereotypes are kind of true. My family background is German, so
Okay.
I, we vibed. I was there for that, but it meant things like a diaper bag or a stroller didn't stay if it was too fussy. you know um we didn't take heap gobs of things with us when we went on outings. There was a diaper
Mhm.
wallet with 2 diapers, enough wipes to get you through, and if you ran out, it was time to go home. Like it was
I love
not, nobody was overloaded with bags. There were no the baby buckets, which I'll make a side note. I hate a baby bucket. Those baby carriers with the handle, like a bucket handle.
Oh, I've never
I
even seen that. Goodness.
I I hate them so much. They click into a base in the car, and
Oh, gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're off. They're awful, and they're not necessary. So any normal car seat has an infant insert, and they're all crash tested to protect your infant. The baby
Right.
buckets only last your infant like 6 months, and then you're having to buy one of those car seats anyway. Just skip that. Buy the car seat to begin with. Yes, it clicks into the clicky base. Now you've got a stroller, but your kid is not supposed to stay like a banana. They're not. It's bad for them. It leads to head and neck problems. The OTs would love you to, though, because that's how they get their money. To get a proper stroller, one that has reclined flat so it can become a pram. Put your infant in that. Yes, you will transfer them. Yes, they might wake up, but learning to go back to sleep after transfer is a good skill. You kind of want
Yes,
that.
it is. Yes, it is.
So anyway, they didn't have a baby bucket because that's all nonsense, and I was so excited to work for them for that reason. And they introduced me to the strollers that do lay flat, and there are a fair number of them. And a lot of parents get the strollers later, and they're like, "Why does this thing recline all the way down like that?" For infants, for newborns.
You don't need the whole list.
Yeah. Um,
That's funny.
and then I've worked for Indian families. I find that those folks believe that children need a hot cooked meal for every
Okay.
meal, and that is, the German family would turn around and go, too fussy. Uh, and I'm inclined to agree. Children at certain ages do prefer cold food on the go, out in the world, exploring. But I can understand that it's cultural and it's important and it keeps the family together. It exposes them to the taste they want to have. The smells of India then evoke those memories of those meals, whereas nobody's going to go to the home country and be like, oh, goldfish crackers. I can totally get it here. Um, and then my current family is half Taiwanese, which just so happens that my fiance is also Taiwanese. So
That's
when
so.
and if the day comes that I have my own little ones, we're probably going to look and act a lot like the folks that I work for right now. But in all of those, the people I've seen that are the foreguard of culture have been the grandparents.
Hmm.
the,
Interesting.
the the parents are sort of overwhelmed with having a child,
Yes.
regardless of what cultural background they come from. They're just trying to keep their head above water. They're not getting enough sleep. They're not thinking holidays or festivals or even language. They're
Mhm.
sort of forgetting to do. They just want the kid to sleep through the night so they can sleep through the night. The grandparents are the ones coming in, and hold on, I'm going to reach off camera for a second. Bringing the books,
Yeah.
that with the little, oh, this one doesn't have it. Some of these books have a little CP in it. so that you can sing the song along with it, but they're the ones bringing the cultural books. They're the ones doing the language practice, and they're the ones expressing grave disappointment that this child is absolutely not being raised properly, and
Yeah.
especially in blended families, it's like grandparent on grandparent war, man. I'm home with the grandparents while the parents go to work. It is a war. They're like, what did your nai teach you? Because I'm going to teach you from my culture. And then like, what did your Grammy teach you? I'm going to teach you about our people. And it's adorable I get to eat well, and it's adorable for me, but I can imagine it brings a little bit of strain.
Yep, a little bit. So in most of the situations, are the grandparents living with the families, or are you saying they're coming to visit and they're trying to undo the damage?
Generally coming to visit. I think of 2 nanny families where the grandparents were even in the country. So a lot of the grandparents still live in the old country for the parents that I tend to work for. But yeah, they come and they visit, and they take one look at the kitchen. No, this won't do. And they go grocery shopping at their particular ethnic grocery store, and then bring in whole new things and just take over the kitchen. And a fair number of them, especially those who are not necessarily English fluent, are very embarrassed about their lack of English fluency. And so they feel that by connecting with the kids through cultural fluency is the only way they can connect with the kids, which is why it's so important to them.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And I certainly know, at least from my perspective anyway, that walking into the engagement I've had, the attempt at marriage we're going to do, we're going forward. His mom has been very worried, and my mom too. My brother's getting married to somebody outside of our culture, so I've seen it from both ends. Very worried that the culture will be lost. You're not marrying one of our own kind, you're marrying somebody outside of our own kind. How much of me, how much of us, how much of how I raised you is going to survive? And I hear that a lot, both from my mother, worrying about my brother's impending nuptials, and from my fiance's mother, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. And I keep reassuring both that no, it won't be lost. The best parts will stay and the worst parts will go. And every culture has worst parts, and they shouldn't stay.
Yeah. How do you determine what are the best parts and the worst parts? Because from my experience, I've noticed when you're immersed in it, you don't see it. And then the further away you get, you start to recognize, oh, this actually doesn't serve me in a healthy way. So how could someone begin to discern what they want to keep and what they don't?
It does help to have outsider perspective, or to sort of detox from the culture. Some people go all in on assimilation to a different culture, and that's how they gain perspective and distance from their original culture, and then they can look back. Others have a trusted partner or good best friends that are outside their culture who can say, "Ugh, wait, you do what? Why do you do that? That's no good. Like, your whole culture does that? What?" Which I'll admit was my reaction to the fact that there seems to be a lack of emotional awareness and emotional intelligence in Chinese cultures. And I found that very shocking. And also the blind fealty to family opened the way to a lot of abuse and toxic family structures, which I have seen people being part of. Now that I've sort of accepted as, able to walk among the Taiwanese community because I'm attached to somebody, I've seen just bad family structures where, there's verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and you have to just take it because it comes from an elder.
Yeah.
And I've seen that also in Latinx cultures as well. There's a strong fealty to the mom, and unfortunately sometimes moms demand things that shouldn't be demanded, and we should be able to say, with a good boundary, like, I love you, mom, and because I love you, I'm not going to give you that because it doesn't help either of us grow.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very true. My husband is from Mexico, and even in like the greeting, you're supposed to kiss people on the cheek. And the first time, we don't do that here because we, I mean, we do when we're interacting with, yes, with completely Mexican families sometimes, but most of our friends are other mixed race and mixed culture couples, so we don't really do that anymore. So the first time we went back to Mexico, and all the abuela and tia and everybody was trying to get my son to give them the kiss, and he was like, I don't want to do that. No. And so I had to explain, like, we've never taught him that. He doesn't know that that's how it's supposed to be. And they were offended. They're like, well, that's how he has to greet me. And one of the
Yeah.
things that struck me, one of the trainings you offer is about consent, is about little people being able to give consent and asking for respect for their nose. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So this is a training that I have offered since I was a high school teacher to various audiences. Because the way my state works, if you are licensed to teach high school science, you are licensed to teach high school sex ed, and only the science teachers can teach sex ed. When you and I went through school, and I'm assuming that the listening audience went through school, it was the school nurse or the gym teacher, people who actually had had sort of a background in pediatric sex ed or sexual education and how to teach it were the ones teaching it, but not my state.
Interesting.
And there's a certain political party who is responsible for that. And so I, with a strong background in chemistry, suddenly found myself having to advise teenagers on their health and well-being and consent and all those issues. And I jumped into it because I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it the best. So I went out and I learned everything I needed to learn to be able to be that sex educator. And then I started teaching them about it. I started teaching their parents. I taught nannies for years about it. And then somebody said, well, I'm a parent. Can I come to your nanny training? And I said, oh, well, why don't I just make a different one for parents? Because there's some specific parts in the nanny training where you go defer to your employer. Well, now I'm talking
Yeah.
to the employers, so I
Right.
can offer a little different advice. But it is, I'll start with saying that bodily autonomy, which is the very heart of everything having to do with consent, is considered by the United Nations a fundamental human right. And this is the United Nations, so this is the world.
Right.
There is no culture that did not vote for this to be a fundamental human right. And as children exist, and they are Homo sapiens, they are therefore humans, so they have this right. And it is just so important to recognize that, because if we don't let children have their fundamental human right, they grow up to be the frat kids that I also gave, lessons to, who don't know what consent is. They don't know how to know when something is wanted versus unwanted, and they want to do the right thing. They're doing their best guess. Their best guess sometimes sucks. So let's educate them so that their best guess doesn't.
Yeah.
Educate them from the very beginning. I mean, from the very, very beginning with an infant, where yeah, they can't issue consent. They don't have the mental capacity, the prefrontal cortex formation. But you still, when you change an infant's diaper, and this is just good language acquisition skill, I mean, it's good parenting all around. You sportscast what you're doing. I'm, undoing the tabs of your diaper. I'm pulling it down. Oh my, that must feel cold. I've got a wipe here. I'm going to wipe you from the front to the back. Oh, I see a little extra poop caught in one of your leg folds. I'm going to have to spread your leg fold to get in there and get that poop out. All the poop is gone. Look how clean the wipe is. Now I'm going to put a new diaper in. If you can, lift your bottom so that I can slide it under, and you'll know how a kid is interacting, because you say that to like a brand new baby who's still in that fourth trimester. They can't lift their bottom, but as soon as they get out of that fourth trimester and start getting a little bit more muscle control, they lift their bottom, and you're like, holy crap, you can't talk, but I watched you do that. Okay, this is getting through. This is working, and on from there. So that way, when they're older, you say things like, oh, my body is really tired right now. I know you want to give me a hug. Why don't I give you this stuffed animal? You can give the stuffed animal a hug, because touched out is a thing. Say as a mom, you
I
know
know
that.
it.
Yeah, it's touched out as the cutesy, like public facing term. What's going on behind the hood is something called oxytocin overload.
Oh,
Oxytocin
okay.
is one of the four big neurotransmitters. It's dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and norepinephrine, or noradrenaline if you're on the other side of the pond. It's the same thing. We just have two names for it. And yeah, oxytocin overload. Your brain has too much and it does freak out, as anything with too much would.
Yeah.
And we call that touched out, because touch tends to be one of the ways of getting oxytocin, but it's not the only one. Conversation also can offer oxytocin, but in smaller amounts. So you can be oxytocin overloaded from too much touch with too much conversation, or just too much conversation alone.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But then, you don't want to reject a kid. They have a need. So you offer them a substitute, a mom substitute, a dad substitute. Like, hey, I know you want to climb. My body seems like a really cool climbing structure. Why don't I take you to the park and you can climb on that climbing structure and I'll be right there next to you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. I call it offering an instead.
Yeah.
But these are important. And now we get into the family in Mexico. Here's where I get a little sanctimonious.
Okay.
There is a grown adult, somebody who has mastered life, supposed to be able to control their emotions, supposed to be able to regulate their emotions, supposed to be able to take perspective, outside perspective, right? They are saying that they can't handle a child, a brand new life, doing something off script. I don't buy it.
Right.
So either you don't deserve to be an adult, or there's something else going on here, such as I wasn't allowed to have body autonomy when I was a child. Therefore, I am going to push this forward because it only makes sense to me if nobody can have it. That's the only way I was able to understand as a child why my ability to decide where my body goes and what my body does has been denied to me. And that tends to be what's going on.
Yeah.
Although there are some times where it is the former. I mean, growing older doesn't necessarily mean growing up.
That is true. And not everyone learned the skills of controlling emotions and controlling disappointment and handling the big feelings. That is true.
Yeah.
And it also goes back to, it feels like rejection of the culture. It feels like rejection of how you're supposed to do things. And that can be hard to get accustomed to, especially if you've never realized that other people don't do this. This isn't how it is in the whole world. So
yeah, and that's that perspective taking piece. So you say, oh, this child hasn't learned, there's other ways to do this. And then if you're concerned that your culture is being rejected, and I have seen it a lot, it's doesn't cost you but a few words to say, hey, what do you know about, for example, Mexican culture? Ask, find out. The kids love to tell you what they know about stuff. Right. Sometimes they'll tell you what they know about stuff and you didn't want to know, like My Little Pony, Peppa Pig. Look, guess what I just learned about jellyfish? Like, I did. So much about jellyfish and I don't need to know any of it. Yes, it's different. Right? But the whole thing is, when you're dealing with a blended family from the grandparent perspective, it's gonna be different. It's gonna be different. It's the whole thing you were apprehensive about to start with. It's the whole thing that shocked you. It's the whole thing that, like, everybody says to you, oh, how are you holding up? Right? Of course it's different, but different doesn't have to be bad.
Right.
Different can mean new traditions, better ways, connection that's more than just checking a box. It's actually meeting a need.
And it can be a beautiful new version of a mixture of
so maybe we don't kiss the cheek, but maybe what it means is, the new tradition is with my Oma, my German grandmother. She made a particular cake, a carrot cake, and she made a divine carrot cake. And nobody seemed to believe that but me. And she really liked making this carrot cake. So we didn't greet each other necessarily in German, but I learned the German phrase for, can I have some cake? And this meant so much to her, because this was her favorite cake to make. She would make it in anticipation of seeing me. Like, yeah, okay, I didn't say Guten Morgen, Großmutti, but I asked for the cake and it was better.
Yeah. That was
So
your
again,
special way of interacting.
yeah,
Yeah.
you don't have to check the box.
Hmm.
And that's, even if you're within a culture, even if you're not in a diverse family, you're staying within the culture, you can always edit. You can always edit. Everybody before you, to get this thing the way it is right now, edit it.
Hmm. Yeah.
You are just as empowered to edit as they were. Nobody came down as a fairy and went, boop, you have the power to edit. None of you do. No, everybody can edit, and we can edit always.
Yeah.
And we don't need to blend the family in order to edit. If there's something that's not working for you and something you would like to replace it with, go for it. You are starting the better. Because the good that you were handed was done by somebody. All of it used to be really, really bad at one point. So the reason it's good now is people made it better. You be the one to continue humanity's mission forward. And I do believe that, what is the purpose of humanity is to make better and better and better and better lives for ourselves and on this earth. And we all just have a little fraction of an edit that we can do. And you're doing it. You're doing your job on earth.
That is a beautiful way to look at it. I like that. Let's see.
I'll admit I did not create that. That came from a guy named, I can't remember. I know his first name is Alan. I cannot remember his last name. He comes from the School of Life, and the School of Life is an actual school, and it's also a YouTube channel. And one day he said, "What is the meaning of human existence?" And I was like, "Yes, let's see what you got." And this was his idea, and I said, "I can get with that."
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do what you can with your spaces of influence, and that doesn't mean you have to. It doesn't have to be a big thing always. It could be little things like healing your family or starting new traditions that are healthier. I like that.
Yeah. And honestly, the little ones last longer than the big ones.
That is true.
All of us who've lived at even to middle age as we have, you've seen the pendulum swing back and forth. Everything's a reaction to everything else on the extremes, but the little changes, they stay.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
So I anticipated that I would be talking about the role of grandparents in culture and in keeping culture alive and in being the vanguards of culture, which, by the way, according to the AARP, according to grandparents.com, according to the independent researchers who study geriatrics and aging and family structures, that's actually the grandparents' role. Like, this is something it's not on the parents. It shouldn't be on the parents. It is the grandparents are supposed to be the family historians, the family culture keepers. Yeah, I made the listeners a little gift. If you go to knowledge.tk/diversity, there is a very small handout about ways to, especially if you don't live near your grandchildren, connect with them and bring forward your culture in a way that doesn't feel competitive. It's not asking them to choose sides. It's connective, and it revolves around food.
Oh, okay.
Because everybody breaks bread together. It is the first thing you do with strangers in order to, assess their positive and peaceful intent. Every culture starts with food, and it's about food, and it includes ways to, even if you're not in the same country, even if you have no plans to visit anytime soon, using the amazing power of the internet and video chats, you can still bring food to your grandchild. And it enables you to connect with your grandchild in a way where, again, grandchildren kind of get cagey. They're not fools. They know when there's a competition going on, and they don't want to be stuck having to choose sides. So it allows you to have a true open relationship with a grandchild without making them feel caught in the middle.
That's perfect. That's wonderful. That was a question that just popped into my head. Well, what if the grandparents aren't around, if that's their role?
Yeah. So this is a way to keep grandparents involved, and it's got a lot of scholarship behind it. So I cited my sources all through and through, and it's free and it's available to you. And since we are recording this on the third day of Grandparents Week, we've all heard of Grandparents Day, but it's supposed to last a whole week.
Interesting.
I thought that it was just timely and wonderful, and I'm happy to pass it along.
That is perfect. I will make sure the full link is in the description so that way it's easy to find and don't have to do writing and spelling and all of those
Yeah.
things that sometimes parents' brains are too tired to do.
Oh man. Yes, and for the parents, please read it too. It'll enable you to structure a conversation with your parents, the grandparents, in order to say like, "Hey, mom, dad, why don't you try this
Yeah.
instead of that?" Because
Yeah.
again, we're all about the insteads.
Yes. And I think another what I'm hearing you say is parents can't do all the things. We have
Oh
to
no,
let
no,
our village
no.
walk in and support us because there's not enough time or energy to be all the things for your kids.
No, of course not. I wouldn't have had my career as a nanny if parents could do all the things.
That is
I have not yet to this day seen a parent who could do all the things. I have seen parents who outwardly look like they're doing all the things. I have been the doer of the things that that parent outwardly neglected to mention. So, that which
That's how
leads me
it
to
works.
next week, by the way, is National Nanny Recognition Week, which isn't an appreciation week. I know we're used to Teacher Appreciation Week. It is Recognition Week. So it is supposed to bring nannies out of, the shadows. So parents
Mhm.
who cannot do all the things are supposed to be able to say, I can't do it. I have help. Here's my help with pride. And that's the
Yeah.
whole point of the week. Um, yeah, parents cannot do all the things. Nobody can do all the things. It is, I am paid a full-time salary and I work full-time hours and I'm still not doing all of the parenting job. My God, that's more than one full-time job. No,
Yeah.
no.
It's
When
a
are you
lot.
going to sleep? You're going to keel over and die from lack of just basic needs being met. So,
Sometimes it feels like that.
yeah, no, parents can't do all the things and they shouldn't. There is a concept in parenting called good enough parenting.
Mhm.
Which is, what you say to yourself is, look, I'm not going to mess you up the way I was messed up. I'm going to mess you up in a totally new way. And then you just drop the ball because you're going to mess them up in a totally new way. You set a little money aside for their therapy budget and you move forward.
My husband and I joke about that all the time, but yes, it's very true. No matter how hard you try, there will be something
Oh,
happens that
I've seen people resent their parents for things that I think are total non-issues. And of course, that's the thing, right? Everybody's going to have something, and it's part of human development, by the way. It's part of differentiation. So you
Mhm.
need to have something you resent mom and dad for at some point in order to differentiate yourself as a human being, in order
So
to
it
get a
is part
sense
of
of
a stage
self.
of life.
Yeah, it and it's important, and it's, the oldest one that I am watching right now, the one I call the big one. She's going through that right now, and she's differentiating herself from her mom, her dad, from me, from her little sister. And I'm just, every time she says something snippy to me about how, like, ugh, I'd never do that like you, I'm like, yay, you're doing what you're supposed to. Her mom takes the bait because I think daughters are specifically designed to like know exactly what buttons to push on a mom. But yeah, this is good. You're allowed to cheer.
Yeah.
You're
Part of
allowed to love that your kid, rolls their eyes and says, oh, I hate you. Yes, good. You're supposed to, because it's developing self-identity. And you want them to develop self-identity because otherwise they're going to have fuzzy boundaries and they're going to be codependent and they're going to be prey for narcissists. And we don't want that, right?
right. Right. But that it's hard to take those comments and oh, that's a good thing because it feels kind of like a personal attack, I think, when it's your little person that you've raised. So that is
Oh,
good
yeah.
knowledge to have. Like this is normal. This is part of growth.
Yeah. And that's where like knowing ahead of time that it's coming,
Right.
can prep you, because then it contextualizes the words that you hear. You don't hear, you start going, I've been waiting for this phrase. I've been waiting for oh my God, you gave it to me exactly like the textbook said. It wasn't even any ad-libbing. The textbook must be right. Holy crap. Yeah. Okay. You keep going. I already know the script. I know the script and I know how this play ends. And I don't have to therefore, feel out of sorts in the middle of it,
Right.
because
Yes.
I know where the game plan goes. And the game
Yeah.
plan goes, the start of puberty is all the I hate yous. The middle of puberty is all the I don't want anything to do with yous. And then the end of puberty is all the my God, Mom, I was so wrong. I can't believe, how did you ever do it? Like that again, you'll hear those words verbatim from the kid. Well, in whatever language you speak, obviously, but
Right.
it is, it's built into our brains. It's what happens when we develop normally. And even neurodivergent kids, which I've had the privilege of working with a lot of, they still develop that same way. It's just on a slightly different time span.
Hmm.
Not that it doesn't happen.
What would, when you say puberty, in my mind, I go like, okay, 13 to 18, but I feel like that span is much larger than that.
It
Just
starts
reflecting
around
on my
age
own
8.
mental
Yeah, it
development.
starts around age 8. So it's menarche, or the start of menstruation, happens later. Just like there's perimenopause before menopause, there's still
Hmm.
a big run-up span.
Yeah.
So this will start around age 8 in a normally developing girl, a little later in a normally developing guy. Again, throw in neurodivergence, it can start even earlier or later. But the point is, if your kid is upper elementary, so past 3rd grade, strap in, mama, it's coming. Or
Great.
strap in,
My
papa, it's
son's seven
coming.
and a half.
It's and we can gamify it because it
Yes.
does feel personal. And again, now is the part where like you're supposed to be the adult, you're supposed to be the one with emotional regulation. So one of the tools that I like to use for emotional regulation is gamifying it. So I have not uploaded it to the internet, but if you reach out to Nanny Jen at nannyknowledge.tk, I can go and find it and email it to you. I made a bingo board of
Oh,
sassy phrases you will hear. And you can do it on your phone, especially if your phone lets you edit video or edit photos, or like drag and drop little stickers on them. You know, that you can go for bingo. There's no prize when you get bingo, but it takes the sting out of it a little bit.
that's hilarious.
Because you will hear them, and they're pretty standard. I taught high school for 4 years, so I've heard pretty much every version from, and that was the thing at parent teacher conferences. Parents came in and they were like, yeah, my kid's grades, whatever, but let me talk to you about the home issues. What do you got for that? Almost every single parent came in with that question. There were a few parents who came in and they were like, yeah, my kid's grades. Bye. Don't want to take up too much of your time. By the way, parents, you can take up as much of their time as you want. As teachers, especially in middle and high school, we've got good advice because we have master's degrees in child development at this particular exact stage. So, we're going to be better informed than your pediatrician, because they took like what, 1, 2 child development classes back in med school, way back, and we have to do continuing ed in it.
That is true. That's a good
Um,
point.
so yeah, but yes, I made the bingo board years ago when I was teaching, and the parents told me it helped. It helped take the sting out of it. They realized it wasn't personal, which is
Right.
really hard to feel like when the words being used are very personal. I hate you. Who
Hmm.
hates you? I do. Who do I hate? You.
Right.
That's very personal. But then you look at the bingo board and you're like, oh, it's there. Okay,
It's
this must not
fun.
be personal. They're just doing what their brain is telling them to do, what their biology is telling them to do, because they're growing properly.
Right.
Boop, bingo. Um, and one parent announced that they actually did cheer bingo in front of their kid, and the kid just like made a little like and ran off to their room because it wasn't landing. It's just because the part of it is they're trying to get a rise out of you. It's
Right.
developmentally appropriate to get a rise out of you. Heck, their whole life, starting at what, age 2, 3-nager for sure, is to get a rise out of you. They want to know how human works. And the
Right.
way they know how human works is they run experiments on human. And you're human.
You're
So
the closest human, so lucky
yeah.
you.
Yeah. And so when you don't give them a rise, first of all, it frustrates them because that's not how they saw the experiment going in their head. But second of all, it shows them that there is an alternative to being
Right.
reactive. And that's good. We want them to know there's an alternative to being reactive, because someday they'll need that.
Yes, very true. Very true. And we can't teach them something we haven't mastered ourselves. So
Well,
gamifying offensive statements.
oh yeah, it's great. But again, then the question is, well, like, am I setting myself up to take abuse? So that's why if it's not on the bingo board, then it's probably not okay. So
Hmm.
that's why the bingo board exists. It exists to have that list of allowable statements, the list of developmentally appropriate statements, so that you know what is and isn't abusive.
That's smart. That's very smart. Such a creative idea. I love it. That's awesome.
I mean, we got to find some way to turn negatives into at least tolerable, right?
That's true. That is true. And that's part of finding the fun and the magic and parenting and children again, I guess.
And since you mentioned you have a child going into the early onset of puberty, I will give you another piece of another tip. And this one came to me from a middle school teacher. They
Okay.
did not include it in my high school education. It is that we talk a lot about empathy, which is the ability to take perspective on what somebody else is going through and to assign, emotional understanding to that. And usually when we talk about empathy, we're talking about outbound empathy. I see your suffering, so I know how that feels on the inside to me.
Mm-hmm.
Around the middle school years and on into probably about 16 years old, normally developing, but then, the tails are big on both sides, so it's fuzzy. A child loses inbound empathy, which is the ability to believe that somebody else can understand what their emotional state is.
Oh, interesting.
It's not that they can't empathize with somebody else. You'll see them crying, the plant is the most beautiful thing I ever saw, whatever. They lose the inbound empathy, which is why any attempt to connect with, yeah, I know what you're going through, that must be tough, you're going to get it's just going to not land. You just have to go with, yeah, that's the way it is, bro. Do your dishes or whatever. It's just, I see a lot of parents going down and spiraling down a pretty, I wouldn't say negative, but a pretty unfulfilling for the parent relationship with their teen, because they're trying so hard. I remember what this was like. I remember what it was like to like somebody and never know if they man, that kid is going to shut down faster than anything else, because they're like, you are lying to me. I asked my gut, and my gut tells me nobody can know what this is like. So you and your lies are just talking at me. I'm shut down now. Instead, that sucks. How did that make you feel?
Yeah.
Ask
Let them
them
tell
to,
you instead of.
yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You are a fountain of very valuable information. Where can people find more out about you, more about your work?
You can reach me at nannyknowledge.tk, and I picked that domain name because it's for total knowledge. TK.
Oh, I was
It's nannyknowledge.tk because, again, I gained my knowledge as a nanny, and I'm happy to pass it along to you. That is why I'm in the parent coaching space. I want to be able to give what I have learned over. I have read a zillion parenting books, and none of them quite nail it correctly, but also I wouldn't be a nanny instead of a researcher if I didn't hate writing papers and books. So I'm not going to write a book. I'm just going to tell you in conversation.
Perfect. That sounds good. I also feel like there is no one method that works. There are, but you got to take bits and pieces. So I think there will never be one book that answers all the questions.
No, and most books could be a pamphlet too. That's my other grousey opinion. They fluff it out with, let me tell you about this case study, and let me tell you about that case study, and let me start by telling you how wonderful I am. Yeah. But the heart of it is, you could have said it in a trifold pamphlet.
Right.
Which is why I created a concept that I call the heart of parenting. And it is the thing that is true across every parenting book you will ever get anywhere. You will find the same thing. If you Venn diagram all of them, there's going to be that overlap in the middle, which is the heart of good parenting. And mostly it comes down to, you have to have mastered being alive, which sucks because most of us haven't. And you have to have mastered your emotions. You have to have mastered, what to do in unexpected situations. You have to be able to delay your own gratification. You have to be non-reactive, all of these things that is really unrealistic for us to do, which is why I introduced the concept of good enough parenting. Because you're never going to be great. Nobody is. It's inhuman.
You're right. That is, yeah. In different words, that is the theme across pretty much all the theories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, yeah. Very good
And
point.
I'll tell you, if you are a breeder, I think is the term. If you have many kids, like the Duggars, what, 21 or something, if you have a lot of children, by the 20th one or so, you will in fact master all these things. But
Why?
my God, your poor body. No,
Right.
no, 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 no.
And even then, I feel like at some point one of those kids starts to become another parent, and you just have a lot of many parents running around helping you. I don't even know if you have to master
Yeah.
it.
It takes a lot of, because kids, as you know as a parent, and as you know listeners as parents, kids will take their tiny little finger and they will lean right on that sore spot, and they will push and they will push and they will push, but they only lean on that sore spot per kid, right?
Right.
Get enough kids, you'll have all your sore spots pushed.
And you'll learn all the places that you need to work on.
Yeah, yeah.
Very true.
Kids are such choice, right? They're
They
growth
are. They are.
opportunities that
But they help
demand
us grow
snacks
into better
constantly.
humans. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for sharing all of your total knowledge
Yes.
with us.
I am so glad I was able to help. And by all means, reach out, ask questions.